I never thought I'd be the kind of guy who carried a grudge, but looking back now, I realize I'd been carrying one for years without even noticing. It all started at work. I was a technician at a mid-sized manufacturing company in Ohio. Nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills and gave me enough to keep a roof over my head. I wasn't the loudest or the most social person in the room. I just liked doing my job right and going home without trouble. Then came Tom. He joined the company a couple of years after me in a similar role. From the beginning, he was the type who laughed a little too hard at the boss's jokes, stayed late not because he had work, but because he wanted to be seen staying late. I didn't think much of it at first. People like that are everywhere. But Tom had a way of pushing other people down to make himself look taller. It started small. If I made a mistake, even something minor, he'd point it out in meetings in a way that made sure everyone noticed. If I fixed something complicated, he'd make it sound like it was his idea all along. One Friday afternoon, I walked into the break room and overheard him talking to a couple of others, saying, "I don't know how Mark's still here. Guy works slower than anyone else. I'm always cleaning up after him." My name was Mark. He didn't even bother lowering his voice. I confronted him right there. "You don't clean up after me, Tom. Half the time you're asking me how to run the equipment." He smirked, shrugged, and said, "Relax, man, just joking." But the look on his face told me it wasn't a joke. It was the start of something. Over the next few months, things escalated. My supervisor, Rick, suddenly started questioning my numbers, my output, my time on the floor. I knew where it was coming from. Tom had Rick's ear. Whenever I tried to defend myself, Rick would say, "Well, Tom's been telling me otherwise." One day after a safety meeting, Rick pulled me aside and told me he'd been hearing complaints that I wasn't pulling my weight. I told him straight up, "That's Tom. He's making stuff up." Rick frowned, like he half believed me but didn't want to pick sides. The real blow came when I walked into the office and found Tom sitting in my chair at my desk, logged into my computer. I asked him what the hell he was doing. He said, "Oh, Rick just asked me to check some of your numbers." Like it was the most natural thing in the world. That night I went home furious. I sat in my car in the driveway for a good half hour before I went inside. I couldn't believe how someone could just wedge themselves into your life like that. I told myself it was just work, not worth losing sleep over. But I did lose sleep. A lot of it. Things reached a point where my performance review, which had always been solid, came back with warnings. Rick said, "I need to see improvement or we'll have to reconsider your position." I wanted to shout that it was all Tom's doing, but I could tell from his tone it wouldn't matter. Tom had already poisoned the well. I knew then that if I didn't do something, I was going to lose not just my job, but my dignity. I wasn't going to beg, and I wasn't going to let Tom walk all over me. That was the moment the idea of payback started to form in my head. The next morning, I got to work earlier than usual. The parking lot was still half empty, and the building felt quiet in that way it only does before the day really starts. I sat at my station with a cup of coffee, trying to act normal, but my mind was turning over what had happened the day before. I kept replaying Tom sitting at my desk, logged into my computer. That wasn't just arrogance, it was a boundary crossed. He had no business being in my files. If he'd wanted to, he could have changed numbers, deleted reports, even sent emails under my name. The more I thought about it, the more dangerous it seemed. By the time the others came in, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to confront him in the open again. That only gave him a chance to laugh it off. This time, I needed to watch him, see how he operated. Sure enough, later that day, I caught him hovering around my station again. I was working on a calibration report when I saw him glance over my shoulder, like he was checking to make sure I hadn't messed up. I turned to him and said, "You need something." He smiled, fake as ever. "Just making sure everything's good. Rick's on my case about the numbers." I wanted to slam the report in his face, but instead I just nodded. Inside, I was boiling. That evening, after everyone left, I stayed behind. I told the janitor I needed to catch up on some things. Instead, I started going through my own logs, line by line, checking for any discrepancies. And I found them. A handful of entries had been altered, wrong timestamps, adjusted figures, things I knew I hadn't touched. That's when it clicked. He hadn't just been bad-mouthing me. He was tampering with my work to make me look incompetent. The next day, I played it cool. At lunch, I sat at the far table and just listened. Tom was holding court again, talking about how some people don't belong in technical roles if they can't handle pressure. A couple of guys laughed, clearly uncomfortable but not wanting to be targets themselves. That's when I leaned over and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Funny thing, I checked my reports last night. Someone been making changes, and it sure as hell wasn't me." Tom froze for a second, then let out that fake laugh of his. "Man, you're paranoid. Who would bother messing with your stuff?" I looked him dead in the eye. "That's what I'd like to know." The room went quiet. Nobody wanted to be in the middle of it, so people went back to eating, pretending nothing had happened. But I could see it in Tom's eyes. He didn't like that I'd said it out loud. That night, driving home, I realized I had two choices: keep reacting to what he did or start controlling the situation myself. If he was willing to cross the line into sabotage, I needed to go further than just defending myself. For the first time, I wasn't just angry, I was planning. I started small and practical the Monday after I decided to stop reacting. If I wanted to hit back, I needed facts, not rumors and not my memory versus his smirk. Facts would either prove what I suspected or show me I was wrong. I couldn't afford another guess. That morning, I told Jenna from IT I thought someone had been accessing my files without permission. Jenna and I had chatted at the vending machine a few times. She was quiet, good with computers, and skeptical in the helpful way people in her job have. She didn't laugh. "Show me what you found," she said, and she followed me to my station. I opened the shared folder and pulled up the calibration reports I'd been working on. "See these timestamps," I said. "These aren't mine. Look at the audit trail. These edits were made after hours." Jenna scrolled, fingers moving like she could read the code of the place. "We can pull server logs," she said, "but I'll need authorization." I expected that. I told her I'd talk to Rick, but she shook her head. "If it's tampering, you don't want to go to the supervisor first. Someone could be tipped off. I can run a preliminary check on the metadata and the access logs without creating a paper trail." She said it low, like admitting she was bending a rule, but she did it. While she worked, I prepared a trap I didn't have to hide in a supply closet to set. I created a small, obvious error in a non-critical report, an extra zero in a calibration constant that would show up on a screen and in the audit logs. I left it saved and closed with the file name obvious, marked Cal07 draft. Then I moved my things to the break room like a man taking a walk. I sat at the far table and watched. Tom came by, as predictable as a bad habit. He sauntered to my station, glanced at the screen, then at his phone. He laughed quietly and walked away. I didn't follow him then. I watched him from the corner of my eye for the rest of the day. Around 4, he lingered near the server room with the maintenance guys. He pretended to check his schedule, but Jenna later told me the server room badge logs showed his card used the entry twice that afternoon. Once normal, once at 5:08 p.m. when the building was mostly empty. After everyone left, Jenna met me by the exit. "I pulled the logs," she said. Her eyes were flat, no drama. She handed me a printout she'd pulled from the server, usernames, IP addresses, timestamps. The edits to my files were associated with the company terminal in Tom's area, and the timestamps matched the times he'd been seen around my desk. "I also pulled the CCTV for that hallway," she added. "You want me to stitch it together?" I nodded. Jenna did more than stitch. She burned a folder with the server logs, the edited file, and CCTV stills that showed Tom at my desk at 5:07 p.m., hunched over, his face in profile as he typed. It wasn't cinematic, just a grainy monochrome image of him at the same keyboard that registered the file changes. The server log showed the access originated from his station, not mine. The audit trail matched the edits. The pattern was clean. Petty comments, anonymous edits that made me look inept, and the physical presence to back it up. We didn't go to Rick yet. Jenna warned me again. HR, she said, is where this belongs, but go through the right channels. If you go in hot with this, they'll probe everything, your access, your behavior. They'll expect you to be perfect. I listened. I wasn't looking for perfect. I was looking for leverage I could use without burning myself. That night, I sat in my car with the evidence folder on the passenger seat and thought about what to do next. I could take it to HR and watch the company handle it by the book, probably leading to a quiet reprimand for Tom and a weird distance at work afterward. That would be neat and clean, but it wouldn't satisfy the part of me that wanted him to feel the consequences of his pettiness in front of the people he used as an audience. I made a choice I still weigh in my head. I'd do both. I would document everything with Jenna's help and file an official complaint with HR, paper trail, proper procedure. At the same time, I would prepare a second layer, the evidence compiled in a way that would reach Rick and the management circle in a form they couldn't ignore. Not to humiliate for entertainment, but to make sure the people making decisions had the whole context, not Tom's version filtered through small talk. Before I left the parking lot, I sent a short encrypted message to Jenna. Tomorrow, 11 a.m., my desk. Bring the folder. She replied with a thumbs-up emoji and one word, copy. I slept that night with the folder under my pillow. It felt ridiculous and small and oddly powerful. The next morning, I woke up no less tired, but with a plan that had teeth, documented proof, an ally in IT, and a controlled path to expose what had been done to me. The line had been crossed. Now there was a way to show it. I was at my desk at 10:50 a.m., the folder closed on the corner of my keyboard when Jenna slid into the chair opposite me. She set a tablet between us and said, I copied everything to this. Don't open it here. Her voice was calm. She'd already decided how this would go. At 11:00 a.m., I walked with her to Rick's office. The hallway felt longer than usual. I knocked, then stepped in when he waved me in without looking up. He was reviewing invoices, the kind of paperwork that lives on a desk until someone else forces it into motion. I put the tablet and the printed logs on his desk and said, You need to look at this. Rick glanced at the first printout and then at me. What is this? He asked. I told him exactly how I found the edits, how Tom had been at my station, and that Jenna had pulled server logs and CCTV. I handed him the printout with the badge entries and the still photo of Tom at my keyboard. I want this investigated, I said, officially. Rick Red folded his hands, and for a moment I thought he'd do that thing supervisors do, pass it to HR and let it sit. Instead, he picked up the phone and dialed HR while we sat there. We've got a problem in calibration, he said into the receiver. Can you come over? He looked at me then and his tone changed. Mark, don't go anywhere. I want HR and IT to handle this together. HR arrived quickly. The woman Dana introduced herself and asked for details. Jenna explained the technical side without drama and I summarized the rest. Dana asked me to write a statement. I did. I included dates, times, and the exact phrasing of what Tom had said in the break room. I signed it. Rick took copies of the logs and the CCTV stills and promised an inquiry. I felt relief when they left the room to set up interviews. It wasn't complete satisfaction. This was the bureaucratic part of justice, but it was movement. It was also public now. That mattered. Tom had been careful to operate in plain sight. I was making his behavior visible in an official channel. By mid-afternoon, HR had interviewed several people, including Tom. I wasn't in the room for that, but Jenna told me what she'd heard. Tom denied touching my files, insisted he'd only been checking equipment, and tried to frame it as a misunderstanding about shared access. He sounded practiced, like he'd rehearsed the right amount of confusion and indignation. An hour later, Rick called me into his office again. "We're pausing for a deeper look," he said. "Tom's access is being restricted while it finishes the audit." He gave me a look that was somewhere between apology and caution. "This will take a few days," he added. "Don't confront him." I left the office feeling both vindicated and restless. The company's investigation was a step, but it was also a slow one. Tom being pulled aside didn't mean anything permanent. People get counseled, things get forgotten, and grudges keep going under the surface. I told myself I'd let the process run its course, but I also knew Tom. If he was cornered, he might retaliate. His petty cruelty had been performative. His next move could be more direct. That night I found an anonymous note taped under my windshield wiper. "Watch your back. People talk." There were no fingerprints and the handwriting was blocky, habitually careful. My first thought was Tom. My second thought was that I couldn't be sure. I called Jenna and told her. She said, "Keep the note. I'll check if any cameras caught who was near your car." The next morning, Tom was waiting by the lockers when I arrived. He was quieter than usual. Up close, his smile was tighter. "Hey," he said, as if we were still on the same petty terms. "Heard you've been busy." I didn't answer. He leaned against the lockers and lowered his voice. "You should be careful, Mark. People don't like a guy who goes behind their backs." It was a move I'd expected. Try to make me feel small again by suggesting I'd crossed a line. I kept my hands still and said, "I followed the right channels." He shrugged. "Right channels don't save people who make mistakes." That afternoon, HR called me back in. They'd finished a preliminary audit and found evidence of unauthorized access originating from Tom's terminal. They placed him on administrative leave pending a full investigation. They also asked me to provide any more instances or witnesses. I gave them the list of petty incidents I could remember: the breakroom comments, the meetings where he'd undermined me, the time he took my chair and my computer. They took notes and promised confidentiality. Walking back to my desk, I felt a small, clean satisfaction. Tom was on leave. The company was acting. That should have been the end. Instead, the next morning my bank called me. There had been several small, suspicious withdrawals at a convenience store chain across town, transactions I hadn't made. My account number hadn't changed, but someone had used my debit card info online. I checked my wallet. My card was there. The bank's fraud team said local law enforcement might want to file a report. It hit me then how layered Tom's capability could be. Whoever had accessed my computer had also had the physical presence to be at my station. Whoever had taped the note could have been watching me come and go. The acts were different: digital tampering and anonymous intimidation, but they fit a pattern of escalation. This was no longer just about office politics. I went home that night and crawled through the folder Jenna had given me one more time, careful to leave no trace of my activity. The logs were thorough, but they didn't cover everything. There were gaps, times when the cameras in the lot were fuzzy, times when badge swipes didn't match a person on tape. Someone was good at finding blind spots. That realization made the situation sharper. The morning after the bank called me, I sat in my kitchen with the fraud alert notice on the table and my coffee going cold. HR had Tom on leave, but the note on my car and the card activity told me that leave didn't mean gone. If Tom was behind the bank transactions, and I couldn't prove it yet, then he was still reaching into my life from outside the office. I called Jenna first. If someone had my card number, could they get it off the company network? I asked. She hesitated. "Not from anything you've done, but if he had your desk, your emails, or you'd use the card on a work computer maybe. Did you?" "No," I said, "never." "Then it's probably skimming or phishing," she said. "File a police report and lock down your accounts." I did both that afternoon. At the station, the officer listened, took the note from my car, and logged the card fraud. "Hard to prove," he said. "Could be anyone." He was right. Without a direct link, Tom was just a suspicion. I needed something verifiable. Back at home, I started thinking about the one thing Tom hadn't counted on. I'd stopped being passive. He thought I'd wait for HR, get frustrated, and either quit or blow up. He didn't think I'd document everything. That weekend, I installed a small dash cam in my car and a cheap motion-sensitive camera pointed at my driveway. I also asked Jenna if she'd be willing to testify to what she'd seen if things went that far. "Yes," she said, without hesitation. "But get yourself out of his reach first." Monday morning, I parked 2 rows farther out in the lot and waited. The dash cam recorded as I sat in my car. At 7:42 a.m., Tom drove in. He wasn't supposed to be at the building, he was on leave, but there he was, parking 3 rows behind me. He walked toward the entrance but didn't go inside. Instead, he circled the lot like he was looking for something. Then he walked past my car and glanced inside. The camera caught his face cleanly. I sent the footage to Rick and Dana at HR with no commentary, just the file. 10 minutes later, Rick called me. "Stay in your car," he said. "Security is on the way." 2 security officers came out, spoke to Tom, and escorted him to the building. I couldn't hear the conversation, but an hour later Dana emailed me. Tom's leave had been converted to immediate termination for violating access restrictions and security policy. The footage and Jenna's logs had sealed it. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no handcuffs. Just a quiet removal from a place he'd been using as his stage. HR filed a restraining notice barring him from company property, and legal sent me a letter confirming I was not under investigation and that the company had found no evidence of wrongdoing on my part. 2 weeks later, the bank's fraud team traced the withdrawals to a prepaid card purchased online using a burner email tied to an IP address registered at Tom's home. Local police took the report, and I gave them everything I had: the note, the footage, the logs. They didn't promise charges, but they opened an inquiry. At work, things shifted fast. Rick apologized, not a grand gesture, but a real one, and told me my performance review would be corrected. The coworkers who had laughed at Tom's jokes started eating at my table again. Jenna got a commendation for her security diligence. I got quiet respect. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The revenge wasn't in humiliating Tom publicly. It was in reclaiming my own reputation, my job, and my peace of mind, and doing it by being thorough instead of vengeful. The process had been slow, but it had been clean. The day HR confirmed his termination, I drove home with the dash cam footage still on the memory card. I left it there as a reminder of how far things had gone and how close I'd come to losing everything. I slid the folder Jenna had made me into a drawer and locked it. I haven't seen Tom since. My bank reimbursed the stolen money. The police said the inquiry is ongoing, but didn't ask for more statements. I went back to being a technician who likes to do his job right and go home without trouble. It wasn't the revenge story people like to tell at bars. No fireworks, no dramatic confrontation, but it was real and it worked. The man who tried to make me small ended up out of a job, under investigation, and erased from the stage he'd built for himself, all because I stopped reacting and started documenting. That's how it happened,